Welcome to See View Circle, our podcast in which we review and recap our favorite TV shows and movies of the past, present, and possibly the future, and in the process chat about styles, fashion, and locations often lost to the decades. We do all of this in service to our end goal of determining just how highbrow or lowbrow our viewing taste is.
Hi, how are you?
How are you doing, Doug?
I'm pretty good. I feel great. Glad to be here.
How was your week? What have you been up to?
I've been pretty busy. Taking care of some business things, and then also been doing some volunteer work, phone banking for the election. So just a reminder to everybody, it's very important for you to go out and vote in this next election.
Getting close to the election.
Yeah, we're only a few weeks away. That's what I'm
very
doing.
proud of you.
Yeah, what have you been up to?
This
okay.
podcast, editing the watch along for the last episode. Woo! That had my head spinning. So I hope you all enjoyed that.
It's probably a learning curve.
I think there were some audio problems the last one. I lost the effect transitions, and it really bothered me. So I apologize if you heard me popping or clicking or anything like that. Anyway, if you are joining us for the podcast for the first time, we wanted to let you know that we are starting off covering the first season of Knots Landing, which is the longest running primetime serial from its era. And what are we covering today, Douglas?
Well, today's episode is called Civil Wives, and it aired on Valentine's Day in 1980.
Valentine's Day, how fitting.
I guess. I mean,
love was in the air.
Love was always in the air. And of course, if you want to watch this episode, you can watch it now on plex.tv. The writer was Jack Turley. The director was Kim Friedman. And as for the IMDb synopsis, Sid's ex-wife Susan visits under the guise of needing Sid's signature on legal documents. Karen invites her to stay the weekend, testing Sid. But it's another neighbor who has eyes for Susan.
Oh, I can't wait to get into this one. This is actually a lot of fun. But before we do that, we want to remind you to subscribe to our YouTube channel or our Spotify. You just, ring that little bell there on YouTube. And you can also leave comments.
Yes,
you can like the individual episode. This goes for Spotify as well. It really helps us to get more viewers to see our show so that we can continue on with this series. We ask this kindly and humbly of you, please.
And you could share this to your friends, too.
Anybody who's like-minded, enjoying Knots Landing back on Plex now after all these years, or someone who's just into like pop culture and maybe interested in Southern California, location, styles, fashion, stuff like that, please let them know about our podcast, and we'd be happy to have them join the Sea View Circle. So, Doug, do you have any notes about the intro? I only wrote down my favorite thing right off the bat was she's on the phone talking to Sid, Karen, and she says, "Oh, your wife's here," and then she had to stop herself and start. It's his ex-wife.
I just thought to myself, oh, this is going to be a doozy.
Yeah, I love it because she's looking all scruffy, and she's meeting the ex-wife. So
here we go.
All right, so scene one, and we have Karen and is it Val and Laura, and they're coming back.
Yep, the three ladies, the three musketeers.
Wagon, and they have a baker's rack. I mean, every house in the 80s, or the late 70s and 80s had a baker's rack. We had one. Did you guys?
Well, we did not have a baker's rack. But what I immediately liked about it was, okay, they've just gone to the thrift store or something, and she needed help picking it up. That never would be put in any TV show now. You wouldn't show somebody doing something as mundane as picking up an object.
Going to a secondhand store.
Yeah, and just picking up an object.
They also had a chest of some kind.
There was an interesting looking chest. I kept thinking it looked like it had some little Louis Vuitton stuff on it. I don't know, little Louis Vuitton logos.
So I guess the subplot here is that Laura's father is not feeling too well. So she tells Karen and Val that she wants to go to Pittsburgh to visit with him and bring Jason along. And she says that Richard doesn't want her to go because it's too expensive to fly the whole family out there.
And plus he'll get lonely.
Yeah. If he stays behind, he'll be lonely.
I'm sure he'll be lonely.
So then I think Karen says, well, why don't you just tell him that you're going to take Jason? Like, just, take a stand. And she's like, oh, I couldn't do that.
Right. So immediately you just definitely see again what types of personalities they are.
Right. She even asks Val, would you do that? And Val's like, yeah,
I would. So obviously we see Laura is kind of frightened of Mr. somewhat abusive husband, whether
Yeah.
it's, not
At least
physically,
emotionally.
emotionally abusive,
So then we have a taxi cab pull up, and I'm telling you, at this point, anytime a taxi cab rolls up to Seaview Circle, there's a problem.
Yeah, I know. I thought, oh God, not Lily May, not yet.
But it's going to be trouble. It's going to be trouble because out pops this sophisticated woman.
Glamorous woman.
Yes, and she says, "Oh, I'm Susan," and Karen's like, "Who?
And she says, Susan Philby,
Who?"
formerly Susan Fairgate.
Yes, so it's Sid's ex-wife.
And it's Annie's mother.
Right, and Karen is all like flustered because she's just been schlepping this furniture and she's got some smudges on her face.
Yeah, she's got a big
her
dirt mark on her
She's
face.
got those hair in those bunches again, whenever she's doing some manual labor. And so she's feeling very embarrassed. And then Susan says, well, can I come in and while we're waiting for Sid to come home from work? And of course she has to say yes. In the meantime, the girls come out and they kind of size up this woman and see what she's all about. And we know that we're in for an interesting conversation that is to follow.
So the next scene, we see the good old Datsun B210 hatchback roll up, and then we know it's Ginger arriving home. So she always seems to be a little bit left out of the girl group trio.
Well, she works, right? She
Right.
works. The other three don't work
Right.
at this point, right?
They're stay-at-home mothers.
Right, right.
But yeah, she's coming back. And then we also see Eric show up on his bike.
Oh my gosh, Eric, he speaks, finally! He hasn't really said much so
Yeah.
far in the series.
Eric looked a little bit more grown up in this episode.
Hello?
He actually had like a little bit of
1 o'clock shadow.
1 o'clock shadow, kind of like what I have right now because I shaved off my mustache and it's kind of
I
coming
felt
back.
the same way, Doug. I thought, have we had like a jump in production here?
Yeah.
Because everybody does seem to have like even Laura's hair seems a little bit longer. Gary's hair seems a little bit longer here. So I think there's been at least, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks in between whenever the last episode was aired for this one, or maybe even a longer production break. I don't know. Maybe we're officially in like the second half of the season that was maybe filmed in 1980. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. And then, of course, what we see is that Eric starts helping out Ginger.
Yes, he's happy to lend a helpful hand to Ginger with her groceries. I noticed that she has those those production grocery bags. They're a special kind of paper bag that doesn't make a lot of noise. They look really sturdy and much bigger. That's they always use those.
I didn't understand what that was.
But she also has some records.
Yeah, I saw the LPs immediately and I got excited.
And Eric wonders, well, why does she have to buy records if Kenny's a music producer?
Yeah, and she's like, well, I like jazz. I like old time music.
Yeah.
And that gets Eric very excited.
Yeah.
Very excited.
Yeah. He says, oh, I'm into jazz too.
I just thought that was really funny. It's like, what kid in that era is going to be into jazz?
I don't get it. He's into this really super soft, lame jazz.
Yeah.
And then he was enjoying Lily Mae's Shady Grove a couple episodes ago. Like, to me, he looks like he'd be...
I thought he'd be into that, the
Cosmic
psychedelic...
Steeple?
Cosmic Steeple.
Yeah.
Psychedelic rock band.
He looks like a little baby Hesher.
Yeah. He reminds me of the kids that I went to school with back
Right,
in
maybe
those
the
days.
people that would be hanging out at Stony Point.
Yeah, completely. I liked the mention of you to run the stereo. You play with this doohickey and you play with this thingamajiggy.
Right. She says, yes, these are the technical terms to get this like huge wall of sound stereo system at Kenny's place to work. But again, once they turn all that on and it's like this really, really lame cover version of whatever that jazz tune was, it was not
And
good.
if that's Gerald, I'm so sorry. If
Yeah,
that's
it
your
just-
music.
It just wasn't. It didn't feel modern. It didn't age well.
No.
They're still bonding over this jazz, into the next scene that we see them. And she's like, yeah, I can't believe how we must be kindred spirits because just 2 doors down, you live from me and you're into the same kind of music. And he's like, yeah. And I just thought, well, is he really into the music? Or maybe he is just saying that he's into it to impress her?
I think so. I just kept thinking immediately. I was like, oh, we got like a little Mrs. Robinson going on here, even though she's pretty young.
Right.
But still, compared to Eric, what is he, 15?
Right.
But-
I was really excited to see this scene, and I had completely forgotten about this little plot point arc. So, yeah, I'm excited to see where this goes. We're back over at the Fairgates, and Susan tells Karen that the reason why she's there, she's surprised that her lawyer is not there to meet her because she has some papers for Sid to sign. And I think she asks Karen, oh, well, didn't Sid tell you that, that I was coming? And she's like, nope.
Yeah, she said something like, I think he knew I was coming, and
Yeah.
that your attorney is supposed to call, and blah, 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 blah.
In the midst of all this, you can tell that Karen, for the first time we've ever seen her like this, she is so flustered. She is so nervous by this woman who is more elegant and more worldly, it seems. And she just feels so embarrassed, the way she looks. And did you notice they were also trying to make the other neighbors kind of look more podunk as well? Like Laura's like smacking gum in her mouth. I was like, that is not Laura. And then Val was so wide-eyed. I mean, yes, she's wide-eyed, but she wasn't that wide-eyed. So they're definitely trying to show the difference between this elegant woman and the residents of Seaview Circle.
The middle-class residents of
Absolutely.
Seaview Circle.
Absolutely. She mentions that the paperwork is involving Annie, and then Val says, oh, yeah, we met her last summer, which I thought was weird because the episode aired in December,
it wasn't even the summer.
Whatever, we'll let it slide. She's like, oh, yeah, she's a great girl or something like that. And then the mom's like...
She said something like, oh, she's very spirited.
Yeah.
So it seemed like, oh, they don't get along very well.
Yeah, they agreed that spirited was the best way to describe Annie. They call up Sid, and then they get him on the phone. Karen gets him on the phone, and he's completely surprised. He even says, when she says, oh, Susan's here, and he goes... Who?
Yeah, and then
then she says, your wife. That's the joke from before in the intro. And then says, oh, it's your ex-wife. And immediately he is not.
He doesn't want to speak to her.
No.
And, of course, Karen being Karen, she's like, here you go. She
Right.
hands the receiver over. It's pretty much she's gung-ho. She's got a mission to find out more about Susan.
I don't know if there was already the confusion there that the lawyer wasn't available. But when Karen's on the phone, she just says, oh, that's okay. I'll invite her to dinner. And Sid's on the phone like, don't
Don't invite
Big
her to
mistake.
dinner. Yeah, I thought
She's nothing but trouble. And then Karen has to play it off because Susan's right there in front of her. Karen then she's already feeling flustered. She's like, oh, I got to make it appear that Sid's really in love with me. So even though he doesn't say to her, oh, I love you or whatever, she says, oh, you too, honey.
Yeah.
And then she goes, mwah, mwah, like makes a little kissing noise and then ends the call so that it shows to Susan that, Sid's her man now.
Right. Everything's good. Everything's good in the hood.
Right. So Susan says to Karen once she's off the phone, I can't accept the invitation to dinner. I just can't. I just can't. And then Karen's like, no, you can.
You can. I want to know more.
Right.
Now.
She says, listen, we both were in love with this man. We both married this man. We have something in common. I've been married to him for 17 years. You must be curious. I'm curious about you.
Yeah, she said something like, I want to satisfy our curiosity, civil and logical. The ladies are all looking a little bit
Val and Laura.
worried. Yeah, Val and Laura are like, ooh, this doesn't look so good.
Right.
And, of course, Karen's all animated and very like, oh, this is great.
Yeah, Karen says, close your mouth, ladies. I'm going to go upstairs and change into something a little less
comfortable. Yeah, so I was like, get that dirt off your face quick.
Yeah. So she leaves the two girls there with this elegant woman from the East Coast. And then immediately Laura's like, I got to go.
Yeah, she's like, I got to go. And then, of course, there's more coffee, though, to happen.
Oh, there was a lot of pouring
that
of coffee.
70s Mr. Coffee was like beaming.
Yeah, it was working overtime because it was so awkward and Val didn't know what to say. We go upstairs and Karen is like trying on different outfits, right? She just doesn't know what quite to wear in front of this woman. And then we cut to downstairs. Sid is rushing in and he sees Susan there. Susan goes up to the door to meet him and she's immediately just sees how handsome he is.
Yes,
and
she's enamored.
He hasn't changed. Even though he's now a mogul of not sledding motors.
Yeah, you're a mogul.
He still is the homespun, pure man that she remembers. And Valine can see right away that she is still into him and she has feelings for him.
And Val definitely looks even more anxious at that point.
Right. So Sid then goes upstairs, sees Karen trying on clothes, and immediately he's like, Karen, that was a mistake. You should not have done that. She is big trouble.
There was something mentioned about crossing a continent.
Yeah.
To make a play for you.
Karen says she's not going to cross a continent to make a play for you. And Sid says that is exactly what she's doing.
Yeah, so he knows her MO immediately and doesn't want any part of it.
He says the more distance between us all, the better.
Yes.
So a little bit later on, back downstairs, we see that they're all congregating together in the living room, and there's classical music playing again in the background.
Yes.
I just don't get it. I don't get it. I mean, my family never listened to classical music in the house. I just don't see why that. I don't know. It just seems so strange to me. It is royalty free, I guess. Maybe she was trying to impress this more elegant woman from the East Coast, and she thought that was what should be played
That's
in
what
the
you have to
background.
play to somebody who's upper class.
Did you notice what Karen was wearing here? What she finally settled on? She settled on this very drab, gray, kind of crepe top. Very rigid. She has her hair back up in that Gibson girl
Yeah, I
look.
was going to say she looked very Gibson girl again to me.
I was kind of disappointed a little bit that Karen would change so much for this woman, to be honest. But we'll see. Obviously, the storyline evolves. So in the midst of this conversation, we find out that the lawyer is nowhere to be found. She can't get a hold of him. So I guess they're not going to be able to get to their legal stuff until Monday.
Till Monday.
How convenient.
And
for Susan.
also what comes out is that they need a signature from Sid to approve Annie's trust fund, because apparently there's a stipulation that was put out from Susan's father that
Right.
they wanted him to sign it, and what they're trying to achieve, which I thought was something shady's going on here, is that they want a lump sum of money rather than her getting a monthly amount of money.
Because she has to now stay the weekend, I think Susan really, when she says, I want to find a hotel somewhere else, I think she's being honest. I didn't expect her to be staying with the Fairgates. But
Yeah,
then
but-
Diana comes in.
Diana comes in.
And she's just sort of joking around when she says, oh, well, why doesn't you just stay in my bedroom like every other special company?
Yeah, she was being a little teenage brat there, but
Right.
we love her.
The upper crusty Susan says, I prefer the word guest. That's more proper. And then I guess it puts Karen in a weird position, because now she has to kind of offer that Susan does stay with him for the weekend, even though she knows Sid does not want this to happen.
Yeah, but I think, she seems like she wants it to happen anyway, so it's a perfect excuse, to be quite
Absolutely.
honest.
Yeah.
She's motivated.
Right. So Sid knows this is going to be a long weekend, and also probably a long weekend for the Fairgate
And they
children
said the
as
boys
well.
could just double up, right? That'll be fine,
Yeah.
So the next scene, we're back at Kenny and Ginger's, and Kenny arrives to find Eric and Ginger there listening to jazz records.
I think it's the Chattanooga Choo Choo.
Yeah, and this really made me laugh because they said big bands are coming back.
And I love it because Ginger, the proper quote is, they keep saying big bands are coming back. I wish they'd hurry up. And I'm just thinking, really, Ginger? Like, really? And Eric?
My mother would always say this to me back in that same period of time because she loves all that big band music. I don't know, like
So wait, she was saying it at this time?
in that
So-
era.
so-
She used to
so-
say that to us as kids, and we would just look at her and go like, "You're out of your mind. Big
So
bands
then
are
it-
not
but-
coming
but-
back."
But it must have been something in the air. If it
Well,
was
there
also-
must have been something in the air, but if you were
I don't
of the
remember.
age of like, well, I would have been the age of Michael.
Yeah.
I
mean,
was
Kenny-
trying to listen to Gary
Kenny-
Newman or something.
Kenny refers to it as the geriatric jamboree.
Geriatric jamboree. What I liked about the scene was then, of course, Kenny gives a kiss to Ginger, and then Eric looks really awkward, like, oh boy, I should not be here, because obviously he's got the hots for Ginger. He thought he was going to get in there.
Right.
So he leaves without even saying goodbye. He just disappears.
Oh, I
Did you
didn't
notice that?
I didn't
Yeah,
notice
he was just kind of like, they were talking, and Eric just kind of
Just kind of
slipped out.
excused- Okay.
Yeah, that was
So
fun.
now, remember what we said a couple episodes back, that we didn't think that things were going to continue to go along very swimmingly for Kenny and Ginger. And here we go again. Once again, Cosmic Steeple
Cosmic
ruins
Steeple.
Ginger's weekend because they have some snafu on tour and they need to pull Kenny in. So now Ginger will be all alone this weekend to
Yes,
listen to jazz music
she can listen to jazz.
with her new friend.
Yeah.
Kenny promises to call from the road. So
Yeah, he did promise that.
Yeah.
I thought that was good. I was like, okay. But he got ready really quick, too. and he
yeah,
just
that
left.
was he was like, bye.
He's like, I'm packing my bag up. I got to go. Bye. So what'd you think of the next one?
I was not pleased with this scene.
I was not
dog.
pleased either. I was really, because, again, I do love John Plachette, the actor, but God, Richard is such a jerk.
This was the first scene where I was like, dude, what are you doing? Like, he was going out of his way here to make Laura feel bad. He was going out of his way to put her under his thumb. You can see as the scene begins, she's very nervous. She's walking in. She's going to try to take a stand try to have the confidence that, she was inspired by Karen and Val to do. And she goes in there and she says, hey, Richard, I've been thinking. And he says, uh-oh. It was really dismissive and just already set the tone for the rest of the scene. She says to him that she would like to take Jason to Pittsburgh. She'd like to go see her father. And again, he says, absolutely not. We cannot afford it. You are not going. And he says something like, I've had a really bad day and I don't want to talk about this. This is making my day even worse. It's like, why?
What have you been doing all day?
In this moment, it's like, yeah, okay, that's fine if you had a bad day. We all have bad days. But then you shouldn't be shutting somebody else down because they could also be having a bad day. And then you can have a conversation about it. But instead he's just like, no. Yeah, this is the real unlikable Richard. And to me, it feels like he's doing it because he just knows that he's not what he's trying to present himself as, right? He wants to come off like he's this really, witty, wonderful lawyer. And he's not that. He's not successful in his job. So he has to put other people down to make himself feel better about himself.
And then, of course, the next minute, the phone rings. It's the perfect opportunity for him to feel good about what he's doing.
Yes, because he's being asked about his job. He's being asked for advice, legal advice, and he's super excited. There's a great little moment here. I don't know if you caught it, but Sid says, oh, yeah, my ex-wife is here. I want you to check something out. And then Richard says, your ex-wife?
Oh, yeah, he got
right.
it.
It was just like it plays both ways. It plays.
I noticed that.
That it could be about the legal advice, but it also plays off that you want to check out my ex-wife, and he's super excited. Did you notice that Richard is wearing that same outfit he was wearing in the last?
Well, it's like
episode?
The pajamas. They were kind of like pajamas.
We thought it was some kind of weird blazer, but it appears to be some kind of like tracksuit,
lounge,
right?
loungewear. Of course, he wears it over there too. I was like, why are you wearing pajamas?
Well, it's not. It's meant to be like
right.
activewear.
I guess it's activewear, but it really looks like
he wore it over to their house in the last episode too.
Yeah, I guess so.
And obviously it shows off his chest hair, and so I think he probably thought, I can meet Sid's ex-wife and I can continue.
I guess what I need to do is look in some old catalogs and see, like maybe I think I have an old Sears catalog.
Do you?
Yeah, I do. I'm gonna check it
out.
out. I'll bring it out. We'll see if we can find one of those in there. That'd be fun to see.
I mean, I would say that everything I know about Richard, it kind of feels like not really his style. But then you might think that that he's using this to again appeal to a younger generation or become more alluring, because in that episode with Cosmic Steeple, he was moted by the younger generation.
Moted.
So maybe he's trying to feel a little bit more sexy, a little bit more youthful.
And then there was one other really unlikable moment there. Really unlikable. He
Terrible.
Goes like this.
He
to
goes
Laura
like this,
to tell her to shut up.
And the other thing that was terrible too is when he was on the phone with Sid, and Sid said, "Oh, I'll be right over," and Richard said, "Oh, don't bother. I'll come over to you. I need a change of scenery."
Yes. Oh, what a
jerk! So that Laura could overhear it. It was terrible. Shame on you, Richard.
But
terrible,
I do love you,
terrible.
John Plachette. Yes. I do still love you. But your character, boy, he was a real badass.
Yeah, they really did some character assassination in this scene. So Richard goes over to the Fairgates and he reads through the document that Susan wants Sid to sign. And he says, oh, yeah, this is pretty straightforward. It's what you said earlier, that they want to give this trust allowance to Annie in one lump sum to teach her, how to be a responsible adult, to pay her bills each month. And Sid thinks that's a terrible idea. He knows. They all know that she's not ready for that.
She's
right?
sure not ready. We saw her.
She showed that in the first episode. He says to Susan, I'm not going to sign it, so you might as well leave now. And then he says, you can go home. You don't have to stay the weekend. And when Richard hears, oh, you're staying the weekend.
Yeah, he gets
his wheels
start spinning.
Oh, if my wife could go out of town for the weekend, leaving me alone with this woman, then maybe, I can get some action here.
Yes.
Right? Richard suddenly is like, oh, yeah, maybe there's some clause in there.
He said, I'll call the lawyer for you on Monday.
I'll wait until Monday. Maybe there's a clause in there that protects the money so that, you don't have to worry about it, Sid. And then Susan's like, oh, yeah. And Susan says, I hope we'll be seeing more of you this weekend. And Richard's like,
yes, please.
I think you will. So immediately he goes right back over to his home and he sees Laura and he says, oh, Laura, I have just been such a monster. And he has been.
Yes, he is a monster. He called it.
And he is being a monster right now because he's not obviously sharing with Laura what his ulterior motive is.
Right. So he's just said,
now he's like, go away. You can go.
Changed my mind and you can go. I don't, I want you to go and see your father. And...
Yeah. Did you notice how Laura then moves in and passionately kisses him like I've never seen her do before. I thought that was pretty wild.
But I felt so
took me by
bad, too,
surprise.
because
Yeah.
she's really like, she's desperate to
Yeah.
have his...
But they both are desperate for
yeah.
one another, really. That's the thing about this relationship. A lot of people talk about it. Why are they together? Why is he so mean to her? Why does she have this double life? It's because they're codependent on each other for whatever reason. They could probably not be together and be happier with other people, maybe. People who understood them better.
Well, we'll see what happens later, won't we? So we're back to the Fairgates house, and now we're in the bedroom with Sid and Karen.
They're getting ready for bed.
And you can see that Karen is like, she's kind of on fire. She's getting excited knowing that Susan is just on the other side of the wall. And
It's
I
wild.
thought she's getting a little kinky. Like, oh, she's like, exhibitionist. She wants to make sure they hear the like banging on the headboard on the wall.
Oh my gosh! But Sid is like, no, because they're kind of arguing at first, right? He's still upset. Like, why did you allow her to spend the weekend in our household? And then Karen says, well, I had to because Diana had.
It was
mentioned
Diana's idea. She blamed it on Diana. again.
Like she couldn't be like a mother in that situation and just like overridden what that invite was. Sid is upset because he realizes that this whole legal matter is just a flimsy excuse, and he says, could we not shout right now because she's just on the other side of the wall? So they kind of slip into bed,
and he shuts her down. Basically, he turns over and it's like, good night. So he's not fooling around.
Right. She wants to fool around to potentially, hear the knocking
Stoke
on
a
the wall.
fire.
And then he says very clearly, you made your bed and now you have to sleep in it. And I have to say, this is one of those lines that is so overused. It is so cliche. But in this situation, it was perfect.
Yeah, it was perfect.
Perfect use of that line. Good job, writers.
Thank you, writers.
All right, so now Sid can't sleep. Karen might have to sleep in the bed, but he can't sleep.
Well, and I guess you know what you do when you can't sleep. What do?
You do that other cliche. You go downstairs for hot
go
milk.
downstairs for hot milk in the middle, or a midnight snack.
Right.
Down in the kitchen.
So he's down in the kitchen, and of course,
who shows up? Susan.
Yes, because she always knew that if Sid couldn't sleep at night, that he'd go into the kitchen for milk.
Right. So
And
she knew he'd be waiting.
She looks around and she says, "Oh, now this is the most lovely room of the house."
Yeah, I was laughing.
I was like,
just
okay.
like, really?
Did you see the mug?
Yeah,
thing on the wall.
The thing on the wall that hangs the mugs, the wood.
That says mug.
That says mugs.
Mugs.
Yeah, I
And
know. that.
she says, "Yeah, I'm so impressed. I'm so impressed, Sid. I knew that you were going to be a success. I saw so much potential in you. I knew that your life would be middle class.
Yes.
But I didn't think it would be so stylish.
So stylish. I
Everything's
know.
so stylish. The house, your wife."
Yeah, I was like, what?
When I look at her, when I look at Susan, I just feel she's so sort of, I don't know, uninteresting. She's so sort of brittle. There's like no sense of humor, really, in my opinion. She just seems kind of drab, her presentation. And I was thinking of kind of like my mom and her friends. This woman would have been more upper crust. She would have been
I could think
seem more stodgy than my mom's friends and my mom and
I could think of someone that my mom was friends with, maybe at that time where you're a little like, who's she?
Yeah.
She's uppity.
All right.
It's that same kind of like suburban.
Yeah, for sure.
Like keeping up with the Joneses.
And that's why Knots Landing to me is so relatable, because this is the existence that I grew up in, this middle-class suburban world. And even though I was a little kid and you were a little kid, we could see these relationships going on and these different kind of things, even between the friends, right?
Oh, yeah.
So Susan says, yeah, Sid, I knew you had potential when, I first met you and when we fell in love and we got married.
And she found him under a car or something.
Well,
Wasn't
that comes later.
That's
I
a
think.
later thing, yeah. Okay.
But she leans in to give him a kiss.
And I was shocked.
And he doesn't.
He looked like
stop her.
No, he was.
I mean, I don't know if he was really kissing her back, but he definitely did not stop her in that moment.
No, he was not stopping her.
And then she says, "Oh, William Sidney, we'll continue this
tomorrow."
This.
Yeah, this. I thought he was into it.
Okay.
Personally.
See, I wasn't so sure. But I was surprised.
He looked like he was reciprocating.
I was surprised that he didn't stop her in that moment.
Yeah, I think he would have just been like turned his head away or something if he.
Because it's Sid.
I know, Sid. Well, Sid comes through.
All right. So the next morning, we have Karen outside and she's watering the plants. Now she's not all thinking about what Susan is going to think of her, right? She's just wearing like some overalls. They're not red. I would say they're more salmon colored, so we're not going to ding the odometer quite yet.
I thought they were more orange.
Yeah,
I thought they were really cute, bright orange overall.
She looked super cute. This was the Karen that we know.
Yeah.
Right? So then Richard comes over, and Karen's like, oh, so you're up early. And of course, he has to make it known. Oh yeah. I dropped Laura and Jason off at the airport because they are going to go to Pittsburgh to see Laura's father. So I'm free.
I'm free and available.
I don't know how it comes out, but basically Karen says, yeah, we need to entertain Susan for the weekend. You want to hang out with us? And Richard's all too happy to do just that.
Oh, doesn't he suggest that they should go to dinner
and dancing on a Saturday night? Sure.
Which is always exciting to me.
Yeah. Karen's like, oh, I don't think that Sid's going to like that. And probably Susan won't like it either. And then Susan walks in.
She's listening.
She's listening in. She says, I think it's a great idea.
I think it's a great idea. And I was like, wow, okay, this is going to be real fun.
Yeah. All right, so now we're not slanting motors, and we see Gary and Sid. And they're talking about that commercial concept, I think.
Yeah, they were talking about last time the Cal Worthington and his dog Spot.
Suddenly out pops Susan.
Yes, this is what I didn't understand. She pops out of a T-bird that's sitting in there being worked on. Like, how did she get in there?
Yeah, I don't know if she was already there.
She was hiding in the car?
It was weird. But anyway, Sid's going to introduce Gary to her, and he's like, oh, I already know who this is. You must be Susan because Val met you yesterday.
Yes.
And, you know, she's dressed so upper crusty, so drab.
She just doesn't. She doesn't fit in with the rest of the Knots Landing world. I felt like she walked in from Dynasty. You know, like he's like, wait, that movie set that's over there.
Couple stages down.
A couple stages down is where we're filming Dynasty. The way that she delivered her lines and emoted, it was very much like there's just no humor or anything in it. It's just very like, you know, dramatic.
This was a kind of a long scene, I will say.
It's a very long scene.
They get into this whole past because she says something like, oh, Sid, this is like where I first met you. And they talk about the relationship. And basically, I guess she always saw in Sid someone who was really strong and solid and maybe kind of sexy and manly, which is not the kind of guy that her wealthy family wanted.
I guess her mother did not like Sid. You know, he was
he
not
wasn't
upper
good
class enough.
Right?
Right.
We already found out from Karen a couple episodes ago that he did not go to college. So maybe he was a little bit more, blue collar than the Philbys would appreciate for their daughter.
Philbys. Now, I'm still really unsure. Like, it sounds like the Philbys are supposed to be from Europe. Let's face it, Sid's got that Boston accent. It is. It came out a lot.
Yeah.
During this episode too, and I was like, oh, he's really from Beantown, isn't he?
So I guess the marriage didn't work out because maybe she had pressure from her family to find someone better, but there's other reasons too. Maybe it didn't work out. She says that after her mother recently passed away like a year ago, she finally fell in love with some other guy that she liked kind of as much as Sid.
And it's the first time that she actually felt something, right?
So then Sid asks, so what happened? And she says, well, you know, I really tried to hold it together, but then I started to go to pieces again. Right?
Yeah, and that was interesting because, I couldn't quite work it out.
Do you remember in the very first episode, it was alluded to in that scene with Annie and Val at the beach? Because remember, we were trying to find out, why did Annie feel so abandoned by her parents? Not just Sid, but by her mother as well, because apparently she was in some mental institution for a while.
Okay, all right. So
that's
now
what it is.
That's what brings it all. So she lost her marbles after that, and then now she's back.
And it sounds like she was going to lose her marbles again, and that's really why she's here in Knots Landing. Sid says, why are you here? Just put all the cards on the table. And she says, I just want to feel like you made me feel. I want to feel worthwhile again. And she says, I'm not here to wreck your relationship with Karen. I'm not here to wreck your life. I just want to spend some time with you and feel that way again. And he's like,
doesn't he pretty much tell her to pack her bags
no.
then
What
and there?
happens, this is what happens, I think is really interesting. Well, he does say that.
He said something like that.
He does say, oh, just leave. And then she says, well, I can't because we still have that business. And he's like, no, we have no business. And then she says, oh, but we have plans tonight. We have plans to go dinner and dancing with Karen and that transparent little man next door.
The transparent man. That was
Which I love that because she was referring to that scene earlier when she overheard Richard coming over to tell Karen that he was available, right? He was being so transparent what his true intentions were, that he really just wanted to spend more time with her. What happens is that the phone rings, right? And then he's like negotiating some deal, and he's showing what a genuine person that he is in this deal. And to me, at that moment, I knew he was not going to go through with any of this.
Yeah.
To me. But I don't think she quite gets that necessarily. She just still sees him as being that pure man that she always loved, that solid guy. So she's still looking to get busy with him.
She might be waiting for another glass of milk tonight.
So yeah, that was another scene at Knots Landing Motors, and it's just such a coincidence because we have another letter from the sack, and this week it might have something to do with that. Should I go ahead and read it?
Yeah, you go ahead and read it.
We have an email from our friends at the Instagram account CBS Knots Landing, and it reads, "Hey guys, just watched your podcast for Home is for Healing on YouTube. Well done again. I couldn't help but be fascinated by the locations discussion where Knots would be filmed in the surrounding areas, and I wanted to provide a tip on the location used for Knots Landing Motors." It continues, "I believe the building is gone now. Unsure because I don't live in the California area. But from my Hardy Boys Nancy Drew detective work, I think the location was in the 5147 to 5341 Crenshaw Boulevard area." And this person has also attached a bunch of screenshots. They continue, "Keep up the good work as I'm enjoying the weekly releases. It's a lot of work, but a welcome revisit for Knots lovers.
You can say that again.
Yes.
Now, I'm kicking myself right now
Okay.
because when I looked at these documents, it looks like that property, which was for sale for like $7.5 million at the time,
Gosh, wow.
which was several parcels. It
Okay.
was like the Ford dealership.
Cal Worthington Ford.
No, not Cal Worthington. It was a different one. But it's very close to where we live. It's like 2 miles away.
Oh, okay.
2.5 miles away.
So what's the crossroads?
So the cross streets, it's just south of Slauson at Crenshaw, and we live pretty close to Crenshaw. But again, it's Leimert Park,
Okay.
so it's still in the Leimert.
And you've sold some houses down in that area, probably.
I've sold some things.
But
over
Crenshaw,
there.
if you don't know, if you're not familiar with the area, is one of the big boulevards, if you will, of the West Adams area. Well, it actually carries all the way down into South LA.
Yeah.
And so it would have a lot of businesses, a lot of places, banks, shopping centers, malls, and car
Well, and they've
dealerships.
been doing a lot of redevelopment down there because of the Expo line and the other train lines that are now connecting up to the airport. They're all going down Crenshaw.
Yeah.
So what kind of happened there and what's still going on actually is major redevelopment, a lot of housing, and that's what that looked like. So from what I can see,
If
I
you don't
know.
live here, you would know that it's such a big project. It's been going on for, I would say, a decade.
Yeah, it's been a
right?
hot mess down
Yeah.
there for a long time because a lot of those businesses that were there forever, especially like in the center of like Leimert Park where there's the little like plaza and theater, a lot of those businesses have been suffering for a really long time because there's just been so much construction.
It's just they're inaccessible. You can't
Yeah.
get to them unless you're like walking, and nobody walks in LA as we've already
Nobody walks in LA. Well, actually, people do walk around
people
there a
do
little
walk.
bit.
And people do use the metro as well, which is great.
So, yeah, it's a shame. I wish we had known this
Yeah.
maybe in the past because it's possible that it could have still been there by the time we moved to this neighborhood. We
Right.
moved to this neighborhood in 2015.
Right.
And before that, we lived in Santa Monica, which is where a lot of the other
Yes. And of course, when we
locations
get
are.
into that, yeah. Thank you very much, CBS Knots Landing,
Yes,
for
thank
sending us that
you.
information. That's super cool. Now, if you'd like to be featured in a future Letters from the Sack, you may do so by emailing us at Gmail. That is seeviewcircle@gmail.com, and that is seeviewcircle@gmail.com. And you can also message us over on Instagram. We are at seeviewcircle. Okay, so we're back to the recap, and we have Karen and Sid getting ready for a night of dinner and dancing.
Ooh, dinner and dancing. I'm
And
excited.
Karen again is wearing this like Gibson girl
Another
look
Gibson with lace.
with lace, and I'm thinking
White lace.
this is now Gibson girl, but without the modern twist. I don't know. All that was missing was a cameo. I just don't think she should be making herself more dowdy. She doesn't need to be doing this to
No.
look like the first wife. Why?
She's a groover.
She's
She
a
doesn't-
groove. We've seen it. She wears color all the time, and all of a sudden she's not wearing any color. So anyway, she asks Sid, "How did things go at Knots Landing Motors today? Did she like it?" And Sid's just kind of very nonchalant about it. But what was it? At this point, I have to say, Doug, I didn't think that she was testing. I didn't see it. I didn't see that she was really testing. I just thought she was going with the flow, and she was interested by who this woman was. But I wasn't really sure that she was testing. Of course, we find out, no, she's testing
Well,
him.
she's testing all right, and especially
because when she asks Sid how things went, and he's just kind of more nonchalant about things now, and she even says, I apologize for having her stay the weekend. He's like, it's all right.
Yeah.
So then she's like, oh.
Then she
okay.
starts getting a little like, oh.
So then what does she say, Doug?
She says, do what you have to do to sit.
Yeah,
and
she
I
says-
was,
she said, if there's anything you have to do it.
I was shocked. I was like, wow.
I mean, for 1980, this is a pretty modern take. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously there were swingers back then. Oh, come
Oh,
on.
there were a lot more. I mean, there were swingers back then. Let's face it, key parties and all
Sure,
that stuff.
sure.
But I kind of didn't expect it
I
from
didn't
her.
expect it, and I will say this.
Because I know
did
she's always such a
find-
goody-goody,
I
you
did
know?
find that this was the scene of this episode. There's always one
Yep.
where I felt it didn't quite ring totally true, because in the last scene, we just had Sid say to Susan, oh, let's put all the cards on the table and let's get this all out now. And I feel that in this scene, which just cuts off with Karen saying that it actually would have continued with them laying all the cards out on the table and ironing all the way through this.
Yeah.
But we don't do that. So I don't know. Because
Pretty
again,
saucy.
it's meant to lead the audience to believe that there's still a possibility that Sid could actually sleep with this woman or rekindle this relationships just to see how if the feelings are still there.
Even just for one night.
Yes.
One night in heaven.
Just one night in heaven.
So we're back to Ginger's house again.
Yes, there's a knock on the door.
There's a knock on the door, but Kenny's not home. Gee, I wonder who it could be.
Well, it's Eric, and he's brought over some frozen lasagna, some leftovers.
And some more LPs.
Some more LPs. And Ginger's sort of like taken aback. She's like, what are you
I think she was
doing here?"
enjoying her night in by
Yeah,
herself.
exactly.
I don't know if she was drinking wine or not. But
She's like, oh, dang, now I got to babysit again?
I'm gonna babysit.
I think in this moment she starts to realize, oh, I think I'm going to have to break a heart here.
Yeah.
Right?
I think so.
So we cut to a little bit later on in the evening, and they're listening to the jazz, and then she turns it off and she says, you know what, Eric, I think maybe let's just talk for a little bit, right?
Yeah.
It'll be a nice change of pace since Kenny's always listening to music. And she goes right for it.
She says, how old are you?
Eric says he's 15. Do you have a girlfriend? He
And
says,
then
no. And
she
then
tries to line him up with her sister, right?
Yeah, she says
Jill.
She says, yeah, my sister Jill is visiting next weekend.
And she's 14.
She's beautiful. Why don't you come over and hang out? No pressure. And he's like, okay. And then you notice he just pretty much just gets up and he's like, I gotta go. Bye.
Yeah.
He just leaves. And the look on her face, I love it because she's amused by the fact that obviously this was the angle that Eric had, right? He really thought that he was going to get it on with Ginger while Kenny was away, like that she was going to be interested in him enough, this 15-year-old. So
and you know what's good too is she got a free frozen lasagna out of it.
She did, but
because she had already eaten.
Yeah, she had already eaten, but you could tell that she was like, "Oh, this is so sweet that this
Yeah,
this
it was
young
cute.
kid wants to provide for her, right, for their little date." I love that moment with Ginger, and it actually reminded me back to an earlier part of the episode when Susan was invited to stay the weekend. Remember, the kids were there, and then Eric walks in really quickly.
Oh, and he just leaves.
And he's like, "Oh, I have a date with Ginger, a dinner date across the way." And then Karen's like, "Oh, wait! You got to meet this. This is Susan. This is your father's ex-wife." And he's like, "Hi, bye."
Right, hi, bye. I got other motives.
So look on Susan's face. She's again really bemused by this because she gets it, right? She gets why the kid wouldn't really care.
I thought it was a fun little counterpoint to that other storyline. Obviously, we only have a few scenes of this.
Yeah.
But it is definitely a little light relief from the other stuff
I
going
really
on.
enjoyed this stuff. I really thought it was really, really sweet. All right, so now we're at the restaurant where it's dinner and dancing.
I was very excited when they went to the restaurant.
I was so excited too. I was hoping it was going to be some kind of lively, upbeat 70s romp, but instead it was like the super maudlin music. And
Well, they did play. They was playing "Try a Little Tenderness."
Oh,
You know that
okay.
song?
Okay.
Try
Yeah.
a little
I
tenderness.
don't know. I just thought it was very sad, and Richard kind of looked so mopey as he was dancing with her. He had his little pinky out. It was very strange.
Well, what I liked was the fact that the way that Karen was dancing with Richard, and it was very like weird, hokey. Like
Well, she
you
was
could
trying
see
to
she's looking.
Yeah,
like,
she was trying to see like
like
what was
looking
going
at-
on with the other.
very comedic.
Yeah.
That was definitely a Michelle-y comedic moment.
Before we get into the meat of this particular scene, did you notice the lattice work? in the
Yes, of
background?
course I
Okay,
noticed the
so
lattice.
This is the first time we see on Knots Landing the white lattice work in the background in a restaurant, and we are going to see it so many times.
Yeah.
I think it's just like their way of like setting up a quick restaurant scene, and they put that in there. I don't really remember the white lattice work being a thing back in that era. You can tell me whether you.
I
do or
remember
not.
the white lattice
But
being
we
a
see
thing.
it a lot on Knots Landing. For years, we're going to see
Oh
this
yeah,
lattice
I
work.
think white lattice was everywhere.
Okay. Yeah.
White lattice everywhere. I'm gonna get a T-shirt.
Yeah. Okay, so the meat of this scene really is the conversation between Sid and Susan, where Susan says, "You know what, Sid? I think it's time that I leave the Farragut house. In the morning, I'm going to check into a hotel in Beverly Hills." And he's like, "Yeah, I think that's a good idea."
Yeah.
But then she says, "But I want you to follow me. Why
Oh,
don't you
right.
come
She's
over
going to get
and we
like,
can spend some time together in the hotel room? Because remember, we always liked it during the daytime."
that's right. She liked a daytime.
It was a very scutsy move. It was a very scutsy
She was
move.
very
for Susan.
scutsy. Yeah, I thought like, oh, is she going to slip him the key?
Yeah.
You know, like that
yeah.
kind of a thing, which
So
I think we might see that in
This
later
was interesting
episodes.
because then Sid says, "Well, actually, I spoke to Karen today, and she actually gave me the green light to hook up with you if I so desire." And she's like, "Oh,
What?
really? Okay, that's very understanding of her." And Sid says, "Yeah, she understands me, and she knows that I won't go for this." She says, "I just want a moment with you again. I just want a moment to feel worthwhile." And he says, "I'm not going to let a moment with you, betray 17 years of this marriage with Karen." So Sid.
I know. Sid. I was like, Sid, you're a dude.
Yeah. And then she's like, "Ah, you're so sanctimonious." And she just abruptly leaves.
Yeah, then she's
but
like-
she pulls Richard with her. Karen sees this. And Karen's like, "Oh my God, is she going to sleep with Richard?" And then Sid says, "I told you she was trouble." Karen's
Yeah.
finally realizing
Finally, she
who this
realized
woman
what
is.
a nightmare she is. I was a little shocked that actually she would go for it, too, with Richard.
I think she just felt rejected at that moment, and she wanted to probably get her rocks off, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think she was trying to wreck Laura and Richard's relationship, or I don't even really think she wanted to sleep with Richard necessarily.
Yeah. And let's face
And
it,
she was feeling vulnerable.
and
She
he was a
feeling
transparent man.
dejected, and he was the transparent man. She knew exactly what he wanted.
She knew what he wanted, and she's going to go there.
So in the next scene, we go there because Richard has driven her to this sort of lover's lane view.
Now, I have something to say about this lover's lane. I can't confirm,
Okay.
but I'm pretty sure that place is pretty close to the Knots Landing location of the
okay.
cul-de-sac. It's in that hillside area, and the street is Braemore Road, Braemore. It's just an outlook where you can see the whole of the valley, and it's way up there in Porter Ranch. And then kind of below it is this Wilbur Tampa Park. People do go there, like you'd go there to see like fireworks. It's a place that I would go as a teenager, just with friends. We'd go check it out because we want to see like the view if it was
Sure.
like 4th of July or
Sure.
something like that. That's the view from Braemore. You're at the North San Fernando Valley, looking across the whole entire valley.
Right.
And then what you're seeing is the Studio City side
Yeah.
of the Hollywood Hills. So you're
Right.
seeing that view.
So Richard has taken her there, and this is a really kind of weird scene in my opinion. They're talking about whether, the West Coast or the East Coast is better. Obviously she's from the East Coast, and she says, "Oh, yeah, I don't like California." And Richard, who probably is from the East Coast too originally, he's like, "Well, I think the East Coast is pretty cool, but it's not bad living in California." So yeah, Richard has shown her this view, and then he says this weird old film reference. He says, "You think you can lick it?" And she says, "I beg your pardon?"
I beg your pardon?
It was really weird. I don't know what film that's from. Do you know?
I don't
He says
know.
it's kind of like a cliche line that people would use if they were, some guy was showing some young kid who's coming up in the world, and they'd show him the view, and they'd say, "You think you can lick it? Like, you think you can accomplish this or whatever?"
Well, I just thought that maybe, isn't he a little bit too old to be going to Lover's Lane as well?
Totally. But
I mean,
in my mind, I thought he was kind of stalling a little bit. Like, he wasn't really sure he wanted to go through with this. So this was a way for him to kind of see how it was
Test the
really gonna go.
waters.
Test the waters. Yeah. So she's like, "Did you bring me up here to see the view?" And he's like, "I guess." And then she says, "Well, I've seen it."
yeah.
So then he's like, "Okay, well, what do you want me to do?" And she says, "Just drive."
Just drive, and
And
I'll tell you when to stop. I was like, wow.
I don't know. I felt it was kind of like some sort of weird homage to film noir in some way. Correct me if I'm wrong. Someone might know.
Probably somebody knows.
Yeah, maybe it was a John Plachette writing thing he threw in there, because we will see him write some episodes.
Yes,
coming
that's
up
true. He
soon.
does write stuff.
So yeah, then later on they stop the car in front of a motel with a neon sign, and she asks, "Do you have any objections?" And he says, "No."
So we're back to the Farragates again. So Sid and Karen are having a heart-to-heart now about Susan, now that they've seen her behavior.
In action.
In action, yes.
And Karen apologizes finally. She says, "Yeah, I'm really sorry that I invited her to stay," because that was not her intention at all, was to get Richard and Laura involved in this. She didn't know how far what Susan was really capable of. She had invited Susan to stay to kind of, because she was intrigued to see what the dynamics were between Sid and Susan. And Sid picks up on that. He says, yeah, I feel like you're testing me here, Karen, and you don't need to do that, because she's the one who left Sid. And so she's the one that is having to struggle through that decision of whether or not that was the right decision for her to make. And for Sid, he already knows. He knows he's happy with Karen. He's just enjoyed 17 years with her. And so I think it makes Karen feel real crappy that she's opened up this can of worms now.
Oh, completely. And who knows what's going on?
Right. Well, we find out.
We
in
will
the next
find out in the
scene,
next
morning
scene.
after, at the Arrow Hotel.
I did try to find the Arrow Hotel, and I actually asked a couple friends of mine who have kind of grown up in the valley,
I love the
too.
sign.
The only thing I could say is I did find one reference to a Arrow Hotel, but then it's a different name. Maybe somebody knows where that place is. I couldn't find it.
It could have even been like stock footage thrown in there.
Maybe.
Maybe the scene from the night before was somewhere else, and they just threw in that shot. I don't know.
I just was, I saw that neon sign, and I was thinking, like, God, that looks to me like Sepulveda Boulevard, maybe like, that's not that far
from
the
Culver City.
Yeah, and that's also not very far from the filming location too. It just depends.
So we do find out that yes, they have slept together, because Richard is putting on his shirt and he's looking to go get breakfast because he always gets hungry afterwards.
That was really
so. Doug, I finally decided that we need to have a little scorecard in honor of Diana. This is the Scutsy scorecard.
Oh, the Scutsy scorecard. Okay, cool.
So we're now going to add any time that anybody from the main cast sleeps with someone other than their main partner.
Oh, I like this.
Okay?
I like this.
So I already have prepared this. We have Laura with a 1. The 1 stands for Chip, right? From episode 2, when she went to go sleep with him to make that connection for Richard, even though Richard didn't know that she was doing that. Now, should I add another thing for her? I wasn't sure.
I don't think that the other
guy,
one, that was not.
It was an assault, clearly.
Yeah, I don't think I would add the assault. Don't add the assault.
But she did have probably the intention to sleep with him anyway when she left the bar, but we won't add it.
I don't think you should add it.
But I will add this now. We have Richard now is our next.
The Laura and Richard scorecard.
Well, it's going to be everybody, whoever else.
I know.
But for now, we have Laura with 1, and we have Richard with 1.
I bet you who's never going to be on there, but I'm not going to say right now.
Right. Who will not make
Who
the
won't
Scutsy
make the
scorecard?
Scutsy? There's a couple of people probably won't make the Scutsy scorecard.
Yeah, so this is such a great scene. This is actually one of my favorite scenes as well. Very funny, because Richard's feeling so cocksure again after he just got laid, and he's like, yeah, maybe I'll call Laura and tell her to stay a little bit longer, and maybe we can spend some more time together and see where this thing goes. And
she's clearly like, I'm out of here.
She's like, why would we want to do that?
Yeah,
and then that's the last line, and then you just see this look on Richard's face, like
completely depleted.
Oh, it's so good. So we actually have a scene from before we didn't really mention, which was Sid and Karen kind of looking out to see whether or not Richard was coming home.
Yeah, they're
waiting. The only reason
waiting.
I bring it up is because she's wearing red.
She's wearing red, and they're waiting. It's like they're waiting for their daughter to come home from a late night party.
Yeah.
They're waiting for Richard to
so
show
now
up.
that they realize that he hasn't returned home, that suggests to Karen that at least they didn't use Laura's bed to have their little down.
Yes, she
right?
mentions that, doesn't she?
Right. Okay, so then a little bit later on, Susan does return home for her walk of shame, and she is wearing the same clothes from the night before,
Same
including
outfit.
that white faux fur jacket that,
Yeah.
again, was very like low rent Dynasty. But anyway, so she comes in, and immediately Sid sees her, and he gives her this kind of admonishing look. And so she said, she says, I always take things too far, you know me. It's one of the things I love most about myself. He says,
Oh, he says something like, the thing about
if
you.
only that were true.
If only that were true. You don't love yourself.
You don't love yourself at all.
Yeah.
And it really does show at this point who this woman is. And maybe there is a little bit of mental instability, and that's why she acts out and does these crazy things. Like, she had just met Laura the day before. Probably doesn't even remember who she was.
She don't care.
So, of course, we have to have a showdown.
The final showdown.
Karen and Susan. So
Yeah.
Susan goes into the kitchen, the most lovely room in the house.
Yes.
And she sees Karen there, and she's maybe doing a crossword puzzle or something, and she's really trying to needle her and get to her, and Karen can't be bothered. She says, you know what, Karen, I really had him where I wanted him yesterday at Knots Landing Motors. And Karen's like, oh, you think he wanted to sleep with you? And she's like, yeah. And he goes, well, maybe he probably did. But wanting it and following through with it are two very different things. She says to Karen, well, I just want you to know that you didn't win. I lost because I was moving too fast.
I moved too fast. There was also, I wrote this
There was
down.
a warning. There was a threat. Next time, next time I'm going to seal the deal, and next time you shouldn't be so civil. And Karen says, well, I wasn't being civil. I was being realistic. That's a part about me that, I needed to know once and for all whether or not there was anything left between these two. And so she pushed the possibility to see what would happen. In the course of all this, she found out how indecent Susan really was. And that's what proved to Karen that Sid would never have ever spent any time with her or gone through with it, because she is not good enough.
She
for
said
him.
something to the effect, I didn't know you would be so devoid of decency. You
Right.
didn't have to make it dirty.
Right.
And that was
in sleeping with Richard.
Yeah, when sleeping.
Taking it to that level.
Yeah.
And I felt in that moment that Susan's confidence did disintegrate a little bit.
Yes, totally.
She
Karen
kind of seemed kind of sleazy in that moment all of a sudden.
And Karen, she basically comes out and says, you're not good enough for him.
Right.
She knew that Sid
And can
is
you
her
imagine
rock.
for this woman who flew across the country to see if there was anything left or to feel worthwhile with this guy again, that hurt her in that moment. She realizes, wow, Karen really did win out. She got that solid, sexy, strong, pure man, and she wasn't good enough for him.
Sorry, Charlie. This is what we call the denouement.
Finally, these Fairgates are going
The
to bid adieu.
Fairgates are saying goodbye to Susan.
Yes, or
Bye-bye.
as Sid calls her here, Susie.
Yeah, well, you know what I wrote in my notes? I wrote, bye, bitch.
Can I say that on YouTube? I think we can say
You
that.
can say
Yeah,
that.
probably. Yeah, they're like, see ya.
Well,
There goes
then
that taxi
you,
again.
you see Richard, and then, of course, Richard has an explanation.
Right.
For Sid, oh, well, we just drove around all night.
Yeah, and Sid says, oh, that was very kind of you.
Yeah, and then I saw Richard touched his nose, and I was thinking to myself, isn't that a sign of lying when you touch your nose?
I'm not sure, maybe, but what I saw it as is that he was feeling pretty crummy in that moment. He realized that, was that really, should he have done that? I mean, I felt there was some redeeming moment there for him. So we go back inside, and Sid tells Karen, oh, yeah, Richard just said that they just drove around all night. And Karen's like, do you believe him? And Sid says, I'm going to choose to believe him.
I'm choosing to believe him, which I
Right.
thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah,
take
I mean,
on
that's
that
a way
one.
to say, what Val had said to Laura after that whole situation with the lie in that episode, where Val's like, I don't want to know what happened.
Yeah, I mean, and
I
that's
don't want to know why.
sometimes
we're at this
you
point.
don't want to know.
Yeah. Karen finally admits that, yes, she was testing Sid all along.
Yes.
And I was kind of surprised that she finally admitted that, because I wasn't really even so sure up until those last couple scenes. But yeah, we know that she says she wanted to know what her standing was with Sid. She wanted to hear him choosing her over Susan in Susan's presence. And now that it has happened, Sid never has to think about her again. And she never has to think about Susan again.
Right.
I thought this was really sweet. They go sit down on that couch with that amazing print. And Sid's again just like, why were you doing this? Why do you think, that you needed to test me? And, she says, well, I knew you loved her. I knew you loved her after we got together, right? Because she had dumped him. And he says, oh, I stopped loving her a long time
Yeah,
ago.
and she said, well, when did you stop loving him?
Yeah, it's like-
loving her.
So it's
Sorry.
like, you want to know the exact date? She's like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then that was a very sweet, endearing moment because they talked about when Diana was a baby and she was ill.
They had to take her to the doctor, to
Yeah.
the hospital, and they were sitting there holding her. And in that moment, they were so close and so tight. And Sid realized that there was no one that he had ever been that close to other than Karen.
And he said something to the effect that he felt like they were just one being.
Yeah. One heart, one mind. It was so sweet. Karen says something like, well, why didn't you ever tell me that? And he says, well, I'm telling you now. And then she says, oh, you're telling me now. It's so sweet to see Karen vulnerable, and then also to see Don Murray as
I love
Sid.
Don Murray so much.
Oh, it's so good. Oh, it's so good.
I think I forgot how good he is.
Such a good actor.
Yeah.
I cried watching this for sure. And
you're crying right now. I
crying
can
right
see the tears right now.
It was the best work we've seen from Don Murray on this show so far.
Yeah, I agree.
Really, really good. So
Good job, Don, in heaven or wherever you are. So ends another episode of Knots Landing.
I thought it was a good one. I enjoyed that.
I thought it was good too, and I like the fact that we're going back into regular.
You mean after the Land of the Free?
Yeah, after the Land of the Free.
the Chips and Rockford Files episode?
And after the Dallas ones too.
Yeah.
It's good to just get back to like, okay, this is cul-de-sac time.
Let's
agree.
Get
back
I
to
agree.
the cul-de-sac.
This is what we like. This is what we like about this show, the relationships, and I was so happy to see that as well. It felt much more comfortable. What did you think about Claudette Nevins, who plays Susan Philby?
Well, I didn't really know who she was. I felt like she was a little out of place.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think that was the idea, right? She was highbrow.
Right. And here's my question to you right off the bat. Do you think in any way, shape, or form, in any universe, that Sid ever would have slept with her again?
No.
I just don't see that.
I don't even think he would have liked her.
Yeah, she was just kind of, I don't know, bland and stodgy and kind of unlikable and just brittle was a word that I used.
Brittle.
But here's the thing. So I wasn't planning on our Untying the Knot to be a deep dive on the actress Claudette Nevins. I really wasn't.
I know you weren't.
But when I did kind of look to see what other roles she had played, I was immediately intrigued and interested because even though she might play this sort of bland, stodgy character here, she has some pretty colorful other roles, and we shall discuss them now in the segment that we call Untying the Knot.
In this segment, we take deep dives into a specific production aspect of the series or perhaps provide a bio of fan favorite cast members.
And while this is not a cast member, we are going to take a deep dive and learn about Claudette Nevins. And again, the reason why I felt inspired to do this is because right away I saw that she portrays the Empress of Evil on Electra Woman and Dinah Girl.
Yes, which Sid and Marty Krofft.
Sid and Marty Krofft, one of the classics from the mid-'70s, starring Deidre Hall, right? Now, I saw the photo right away of Claudette, and she is wearing this necklace.
Well, she's very Halloween looking.
It's very Halloween.
She's got the bat necklace.
She has green skin.
She
has this, crazy kind of witch wig.
She's a little Susie Sue.
It's so Halloween, and because it is Halloween season, in case you didn't know, if you're watching this right now in the current time, and we did watch the episode, right? Actually,
yes.
There's 2 episodes. We just watched the first one.
Yeah, I want to watch the other one.
And she plays the hell out of this role. So does her co-star,
Jacqueline Hyde.
Jacqueline Hyde!
Who I never heard of, but when I first saw the Jacqueline Hyde character, I thought, is that Claudette? But then I saw Claudette.
Because she appears first.
She's younger. Claudette. It's weird. I guess, it was, it would have been a few years before Knots Landing.
And what a huge difference these 2 roles are. I mean, this is high camp.
Super camp.
The special effects are really cheesy, but we love that. That's one of the reasons why we're so crazy. We were talking about it. Like, this is the stuff we grew up on. This is why we are the way we are.
Totally.
She does another role that has Halloween vibes to it as well. In fact, this was her very first film role, was a movie called The Mask from 1961, not to be confused with the 1994 film starring Jim Carrey, although there is definitely some sort of crossover in their concept. I think The Mask from 1984 was inspired by a comic book, but I wonder if the comic book was inspired by this movie.
Oh, I bet you.
So now you didn't really watch the whole film because you had some other stuff to do, but Claudette plays a character named Pam Albright. She is the fiance of the lead character, who is a psychiatrist who has been shipped this mask, which is an antique or a relic from the Aztec civilization. I guess it was stolen from some museum. It looks really, really cool. But basically, when you put on the mask, you see all these weird, crazy, frightening things.
Like kind of hallucinations.
It is that. And in fact, you left the room, so you didn't hear this part. But I do think that the mask is meant to be an allusion to drug use. Because at some point, when this guy puts on this mask and sees all these crazy, surrealistic visions, he's obsessed with it. And she even says it's like an addiction. He needs to keep going
wow.
back to the mask because he wants to experience all that the man can experience, all the different dimensions, right?
I like it.
Yeah, and it's actually pretty cool. This is a B movie, but it's kind of like a cult horror film. And it's actually the very first Canadian horror film to be distributed internationally. And it is the first Canadian film to use 3D technology. And they do this very extensive, elaborate scenarios, these dream sequences that have a lot of different special effect things going on here. Some of it's like overlay of projection. Some of it is just good old fashioned makeup and hair.
I saw a lot of smoke too.
Yeah, a lot of smoke. And then of course the 3D, they brought in some 3D camera to film all this stuff. They took actually 8 weeks to film this like 14 minutes of footage that is seen throughout the film. And what's interesting, in the beginning of the film, there's this like very straightforward guy who is instructing the audience that would see this in the movie theater when to put on your 3D glasses.
Oh, I see.
And so in the middle of the movie, it says, "Put on your mask now."
Oh, cool.
Put on your mask.
It's a shame
now.
that Elvira didn't do this one in
Put
the
on
80s.
your mask now. So now that we have the masks on, we're going to take them off because
You can't really talk.
we can't talk. And also in the movie, when they put the mask on, then they end up murdering people. So we don't. That's not our podcast.
We don't have time for murder today. We got to finish up the podcast.
Yeah, Claudette's character is the lead, one of the leads, really, and she does escape being murdered, but she is in some of these dream sequences, and it's really cool. I think it was really great, and for this being her very first film role, I was impressed. So Claudette was born in 1937 in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting. I read that part too, and I thought, oh, so she really is trying to pretend she's a Euro with her mid-Atlantic twang.
Yes, indeed.
In the show.
She first studied acting at a special performance high school on the Upper West Side in New York City. And then she continued on at NYU, where she graduated. She was a huge theater actress in the beginning, and she did a bunch of off-Broadway stuff. But her first Broadway role was in 1960 in a play called The Wall, and she acted opposite George C. Scott.
Oh, okay. That's pretty big.
Yeah, and The Mask, which is the movie we just discussed, was the following year. So after that, she was pulled out to Los Angeles like all actors.
Oh, well.
And for the next several decades, we're talking 4 decades, she enjoyed a very healthy career in TV and film. Some of her career highlights include a stint on the daytime soap Love of Life. She also provided voiceover work for 13 episodes of the cartoon adaptation of Planet of the Apes.
Ooh, okay.
She had appearances in episodes of The Rockford Files, which, of course, we referenced in the last episode. Police Story, Heart to Heart. She also did 10 episodes of a show called Husbands, Wives, and Lovers, which, get this.
Oh.
This was a show created by Hal Dresner and Joan Rivers in 1978. And it could be considered really the sitcom version of Knots Landing because it followed the lives of 5 couples, neighbors, and friends living in the San Fernando Valley.
Oh, how weird. I'd like to see that.
I would like to see
We
that
need to
too.
find that one. That's going to put that on the queue.
So I don't know if that was like a short-lived one that was on the Roberts Retro Rewind, but one that certainly is the one that you found.
Right. I found one. That was a show that was developed by David Jacobs before Knots Landing.
Yes, this would have been the pilot season of 1979, right before Knots Landing was filmed. And this was a show called Married the First Year.
But unfortunately, the first year they got
yeah,
divorced,
yeah.
I guess.
After 4
How many
episodes?
episodes? 4 episodes. Lasted 4
now,
episodes.
I don't think that Claudette was one of the people in the marriage. She must have been like a mother of the people that got married, but she was in all 4 episodes of the ones that were produced and aired. But
well, we got to see at least just the intro on the
because
Roberts
we saw it on
Retro
Roberts
Rewind.
Retro Rewind. Thank you very much for including that in your compendium of all things 1979. And that first episode was written by David Jacobs, and the show was created by David Jacobs, which obviously is why Claudette was on his radar to play this role in this episode of Knots Landing. Now, afterwards, Claudette went on to appear in an episode of Three's Company. I want to see if you can remember this.
Wow.
There's an episode called The Older Woman, where Jack's roommates think that she's dating a septuagenarian because of, some confusion, right? Of course, on Three's Company, but actually he's dating Claudette Nevins, who it's like a cousin of the Ropers or something weird like that. She also was in an episode of Dallas in 1990.
Oh, that's kind of ironic. She made her way back.
She appeared in 9 episodes of Melrose Place in the 90s, which I don't really remember her character in that.
I don't watch that.
She was also in the Star Trek Next Generation film called Star Trek Insurrection in the late 90s.
Oh, okay.
And she continued to work all the way up.
I could see her being like a Star Trek type of person.
You can that face.
She looks very Star Trek to me.
I agree.
That's why I kind of figured that when you initially told me we were going to do a deep dive into her, I was willing to bet that she had done some vintage Star Trek.
I didn't see any vintage Star Trek.
Yeah,
but
she looks like somebody
does.
You would see in that show.
Yeah. So she continued working up into the early 2000s, and then she passed away in 2020 at the age of 82.
Oh, wow.
So
she had a good run.
She did. And I think she did a good job in this, too, as someone that definitely was very confident, again, throughout the episode, and definitely someone that you don't like, through this episode. She's testing this
and
relationship.
I think that's the thing I want to always say, too, that just because the character is unlikable doesn't mean that we don't like the actors. I mean, I love the actors.
Right.
That's why they're so good. If you can make me...
If they make you feel something.
Yeah, if they make you feel something, then... So even though Richard...
Right.
Yes, Richard...
Or Lily May.
Yeah, Lily May. Richard, you're a jerk, but you know what? John Plachette, what a great actor.
Absolutely, absolutely. So all you people out there on the social media message boards, don't hate the actor. You can hate the character, but don't hate the actor.
Right.
They're doing a great job to make you hate the character. All right, so what do you think about the rest of the episode? The writing, the directing, you felt that it was a return to what we're used to seeing?
Yes,
so
I was
far
glad we came back to the cul-de-sac. Back to the sack.
Yeah, I liked also seeing a little bit more of Ginger and seeing more of Eric finally, because he hasn't really done much, Eric, out of all the Fairgate children. He's the one they're kind of saved so far. And so I'm excited to see where this goes with Ginger.
I'd say maybe, though, the only thing that was still a little far-fetched was, the fact that they just kind of dropped the whole thing about Annie's...
Well, it was a ruse. Apparently.
I guess it was a ruse, but I mean, I still kind of think would she really? Okay, she does have a reason to do it and come out.
Yeah.
But would you really travel all that way just to try it on?
Right.
I don't know.
Knowing that she might have a little mental issue going on.
Yeah.
That maybe there was an angle there. She was trying to get something signed or something. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I think that could be a whole nother episode.
Now, do you think, was there any other plot line in Knots Landing that might happen later on down the road that this scenario reminded you of? The more chic woman from the past who had a relationship with your husband that you're now having to deal with in the present?
I can't remember.
Well, what happens when Karen is then married to Mac?
Oh,
and
yes.
Matheson shows up.
That's right, isn't it? It's the same thing again.
Same thing again.
Oh, okay. Yeah, but
and
that's a spoiler.
I feel like I should be wearing my Kiss the Cook apron.
Don't do any spoilers right now. We're still in season 1.
So, actually, on this topic, we have a poll. I don't know if you noticed that every week we try to have a poll over on our Instagram and over on our Spotify. The poll for this week is as follows, and we would like you to submit your answer. The poll is: have you ever been intimidated by the ex of a spouse or a long-term partner of yours? Let us know.
Let us know. I can't say that I have.
Or on Instagram.
I can't say that I've ever had that.
Oh, yeah. All right. Did you have a favorite line or anything?
Well, my favorite line I told you before was "Big Band is coming back."
Yeah, that was
again because it struck a chord with me. Relating to my growing up.
I know this. You've told me this before. So when I heard that, I laughed so hard. It was exactly what your mom had said.
And wait till I tell my mom.
Yeah, you have to.
I'm going to tell her. Oh, my
She'll
God.
get a kick out of
You're
that.
right. Big Band still is coming back. It just hasn't come back yet.
So my favorite quote, I mean, there's several, but one of them was the one where Karen said, "Close your mouths, ladies. I need to go upstairs and change to something a little less comfortable."
That was a good one, too.
I loved when Susan called Richard the transparent little man next door. I also loved, again, probably the best of all, was the simple cliche line, but executed perfectly in this particular script, which was Sid telling Karen, "You made your bed, now you have to sleep in it." Meaning, you brought this woman here, she's now sleeping next door, and now we're not going to fool around because you brought her here. All right, and now we're coming in for a landing on this episode to get right down to the Lotus Point. This, of course, is our gauge to find out how lowbrow or highbrow a show, movie, or series ultimately is. And at the end of this season, we are going to tally it up and find out what the official brow meter rating is for this first season of Knots Landing. So, Doug, what did you think? What did you rate this 8th episode?
Well, you're going to be shocked, but I'm actually going high up there on the brow meter, so between 1 and 5. I'm going to give it a 4.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, I liked it. I thought it was well written, of course, and they talked about topics that I thought you wouldn't necessarily hear about at that time period. And the fact that Karen is addressing, you got to do what you got to do.
Yeah.
Like, that was pretty modern.
I think so, too.
In her outlook. So, yeah, I want to give it a 4. What
Okay.
about you?
I think I have it as a 3.5. And I think the only reason was that maybe the Ginger and Eric stuff was slightly silly, but I love it. Don't get me wrong, I love it because, as one of our viewers has pointed out, just because something is lowbrow doesn't mean that it's not good.
Oh yeah,
right?
I mean, I love lowbrow.
Right. And yeah, ultimately I enjoyed it and I loved it. I love seeing the return to what we expect from Knots Landing instead of having the Dallas crossover and instead of having all that crazy weird action that we saw in the last episode that didn't make any sense or feel like it was part of the Knots Landing universe.
So Brady, what do you got coming up next then?
Well, next on Seaview Circle, Ginger is being harassed with gifts from a mysterious source.
Ooh, I wonder who that could be.
I wonder if it has anything to do with today's episode.
We'll just have to watch and find out.
And we'll see you then.
Back on the sack.
Thank you for watching. Have a great week.
All right, bye, everybody.